Story 1. Back in the 1990s, a tiny drop of nail polish on the toe was used, being careful to ensure they can't put their foot in their mouth. Different color clothing was also utilized. Most importantly, using their names with them individually is super important. Repetition of their names means they will start to look and respond to their own name early. Story 2. Painted the big toenail. It doesn't take long as a parent of identical twins to figure out who is who. We had the toenail painted for maybe a week before it was easy to tell who was who. Story 3. As an adult identical twin, I have wondered many times if we were accidentally switched as babies, and all this time I've really been Tom. This is an actual shower thought of every identical twin. Story 4. I had a girlfriend with 9 fingers. She was very petite, around 90 pounds. She told me her mom was the same build as her when she got pregnant with twins. So, in the womb, my girlfriend's sister's foot pushed on her left hand. Therefore, her pinky finger just didn't develop. When I asked if her sister had a deformity, she said, "No, that bitch." Story 5. So this would be 2011. They put a hat with Baby A on my first son and a hat with Baby B on my second, as well as bracelets. I was with them the whole time for the weighing and vitals check, and they take footprints right away. For my wife's sanity, she put a little Sharpie on Baby A's sole of his foot. Then, within a day, you kind of just knew. They're identical, but family and all their friends can tell them apart pretty quickly, even if you try and trick them. It's tough to explain unless you have friends that are twins. You understand it. I still call them by the wrong name, but all parents do that. I called one by the dog's name once. That cost me an apology and a Lego set. Story 6. When our twins came along, we decided to assign each a color. One was always in blue, the other in green. It started off as a practical thing, but as they got older, they each developed a preference for their own color. It became part of their individual identity. As funny as it sounds, that color coding stuck with them, and now, as teenagers, their rooms are themed around their colors. Their gadgets and even their bikes reflect these color choices. It's hilarious looking back at baby pictures trying to figure out who is who. But now, we can tell them apart by the color aura they literally chose to live with. Story 7. I got some baby toenail polish. Baby A's nails were painted pink, while Baby B's were painted purple. After they got a little older, I could look at their faces and tell them apart. When they learned their names, they would let you know if you got them confused. Also, Baby B's cry was a little more screechy than her sister's. Story 8. Silly story. A long time ago, when I was 12, I think, I learned that this really cute girl from my class, who I had a crush on, had a brother. I met the brother a year or two younger than us and started a friendship, in part because he was her brother, in part because he was actually a cool kid. And so, over weeks, we developed a cool friendship, chatting about random things in the courtyard every now and then. Until one day, I see this kid standing next to his identical twin brother, and both of them look at me, smile, and say, "Hey, how's it going?" with my name inserted. In summary, for weeks, I had developed a friendship and chatted with both of them, unaware there were 2 of them. But because I knew they were related to my classmate, we never bothered with names. Story 9. I was so afraid of mixing them up. When I brought them home, they still had their hospital stickers attached to their backs, so that was helpful. Laughing out loud, but they were different weights, so that also helped, and it wasn't nearly the problem I thought it would be. Sometimes I can't tell them apart in baby pictures, and they definitely can't tell themselves apart, but I have no fears that they were mixed up. Story 10. Baby A had an internal fetal heart monitor, which caused a small scab on her scalp. Those first few days, that scab was our only reference, up until we did the one-toe with nail polish trick. Story 11. I babysat identical twins. The parents dressed them the same and gave them names one letter different from each other. So, name-wise, I couldn't differentiate them, but visually, I could. One twin was skinnier and smaller than the other. Not by a dramatic amount, but enough that you could see it. Their father was clueless and just drew on the kid's feet with something, so they were literally numbered. The thicker twin was 1 and the skinnier twin was 2. It was also weird to see they had a favorite twin. Story 12. My father and his brother came home from the hospital at different times. Knowing my grandmother, She probably had a good handle on one twin's mannerisms by the time the other came into the equation. Story 13. It wasn't that hard. One was always just a bit chunkier than his brother. That one also had a scar on his chest from when liquid was removed from his lung. The freckles are different. They sound different, have different mannerisms. For my own ease, I did dress them in different colors, and I tried to keep bracelets made of embroidery floss on them. That didn't work entirely to plan. One would always rip his off, but the other really liked his bracelet, and I had to replace it when it got worn for the first 4 years of his life. People have a hard time mentally handling twins, especially identical ones, but they're just two brothers who look very related. Story 14. Nail polish in different colors on the big toe. A friend did this. She told me she did both babies because she did not want either to be jealous. Story 15. One of mine had a birthmark on his head that his brother didn't have. Once they got enough hair, it got harder to tell. Story 16. My mom had identical triplet boys. One had a little birthmark or soft spot on his head that was easily identifiable, so he was good. The other two looked exactly the same. My mom says she always knew, which I believe. My dad didn't know anything though and wanted to tattoo their initials onto their heels. Obviously, everyone vetoed that and settled on painting the big toenail of baby 1 and leaving baby 2 blank. Story 17. Not identical, but close enough at birth that it was hard to tell them apart. I did colors as someone else mentioned, but one has 2 scars from surgeries at 2 and 3 days old. When I was half asleep and delirious, I would check for the scars. My cousin painted one of her twins' big toenails to distinguish. Story 18. It reminds me of the parents in Argentina a couple of years ago who had to resort to forensics because they lost track of who was who. Story 19. Identical twins stop looking identical when you know them. Mom said as newborns, she color-coded my brothers, but it wasn't for her benefit. It was for everyone else. My brothers don't even look alike to me anymore. Story 20. The hospital bracelets were invaluable at the start, then we just painted one of their toenails. We had to really keep up with the repainting though, because if they were naked, there was no way to tell them apart. Eventually, we started dressing each in certain colors, and when they got old enough, they got to pick their own color. One had a freckle near an elbow we tracked as well. I liked the idea of doing a Tomax and Zamet, a permanent facial scar thing, but since they're girls, my wife said that was a bad idea. Story 21. One had slightly green eyes, brown hair, and would always lay on the right side when asleep. The other one had brown eyes. Story 22. The thing about being a parent of twins is that you become hyper-attuned to the smallest differences between them since they completely dominate your life for well over a decade. You find even the tiniest markers in case you're not sure. A mole on their left foot or a slight bend in an earlobe, the way they say a particular word, etc. Story 23. I think dressing them in slightly different outfits or adding unique accessories like hats or socks works. Not only did it help you keep track of who is who, but it also will be a cute keepsake. Story 24. We never dressed them the same and encouraged the development of their own personalities. They might look the same but are different people. Story 25. My sister and her twin are identical twins. My parents use a dot of different color nail polish on the bottom of their feet to tell them apart as babies. Story 26. Kept the hospital bracelets on as long as possible. However, there was also a approximately 20% weight difference, and the larger one was significantly jaundiced, so they were different colors for the first 6 weeks or so. Story 27. I am an identical twin, and my sister and I, along with some siblings, were adopted when we were almost 3. It was a difficult situation. We were in foster care for a year due to abuse and neglect. My biological mother would create an issue, insisting that people were calling my sister and me the wrong names, although she wouldn't show up for court. She claimed we were switched. It's funny because we knew our names at that age. Eventually, they managed to resolve that issue, but I have always wondered. Story 28. Have twin nieces. As an infant, one had something I was told is referred to as a stork bite on her nose. Essentially a couple of very small veins on her nose. So, it was easy to tell as long as she wasn't screaming because the wrinkles from a screwed up, angry baby face would hide the veins. After a year or two, it was easy to tell by their bearing. They had very different attitudes, stances, mannerisms, etc. Story 29, you just look at them. They are not perfect copies of each other. The first thing I look for in twins is head shape. Often, one will have a wider head, and the other will have a narrow head. Story 30, all these people saying it doesn't really matter. What's it like to go through life without so much as an ear infection? It does matter which one gets the treatment. Story 31. I've known about 5 sets of twins closely while attending school and university. After you get to know their personalities, it's easy to tell them apart. As babies, I'd recommend temporary tattoos. Story 32. My parents just gave up. They just mash our names into one name and call us both that. 30 years later, we both still get called John Joe like it's one name. Story 33. My aunt has twins, and for the first couple of years of their lives, our family was like, which one are you? The twins learned pretty quickly to be like, I'm Name. Story 34. Not the parent, but the uncle who helped out a lot color coding. One of them only wore purple and the other one only wore pink until they were old enough to be able to remember their own names. The parents were incredibly firm that nobody changes their outfits ever without express permission to ensure nobody screwed up their system. Story 35. As a stepmom to fraternal twins and a biological mom to identical twins and another set of fraternal twins, one thing I did with my identical twins was always watching their eye color. Even though they are identical, I noticed how my identical twin daughter's blue eye color would change. So, one of my twins has her left eye dark sapphire blue and her right eye light sky blue, whereas her twin sister has her left eye light sky blue with her right eye being dark sapphire blue. Story 36. So while my boys were still in the neonatal intensive care unit, we painted a toenail of each a different color. Then, as they grew older, I started dressing them in certain colors. Blue for one, green for the other. Now, when I go back to photos, it's easier to tell who's who. Story 37. Identical twin here. I was quite a bit bigger and rounder than my brother, so if you saw us both at once, it definitely wasn't too difficult to see who's who. Also, I always got red stuff while my brother got blue stuff, so that probably helped. Story 38. One was 1 pound heavier at birth, and it is still that way now, 6 months later. Plus, to us, they just look different despite being identical. Story 39. We used to paint the eldest's big toenail green and the youngest's purple. This was because in alphabetical order of those two colors, we would remember who was the eldest twin. Story 40. Used little anklets for a bit. Eventually, that ended up not being very practical as they would find ways to take them off. What worked best for me was just making note every day of who was wearing what. It seemed like a lot of extra mental effort at the beginning, but after a bit, it just became second nature. Mine are now turning 3, and I am confident they weren't ever mixed up. Granted, I am able to tell them apart quite easily due to subtle differences. Story 41. My friend who has identical boys said it was only an issue for the first 2 or 3 weeks. After that, they could tell one from the other. Prior to that, though, she said they didn't really worry about it. The two names kind of settled on the kids when they got to that stage where they could differentiate. Story 42. My aunt is 110% sure that her twins, Jackie and Jenny, are not living as 45-year-olds with their hospital birth names despite dressing them in twin outfits with alternating pocket sides. We used to call Jackie lefty and Jenny righty. I don't think it really matters. It's just a name until they get old enough to have a personality that identifies them. They did a correction of names at about 1 year old, took the baby footprints from the hospital and compared them. They were cross-named. It's good now though, maybe? I can tell them apart now from how they say hi, their eyes, and their hugs when we meet. Jackie is a tight hugger and wide-eyed. Jenny is like a grandma hug, and her eyes exude compassion. They have twin attributes like speech and finishing each other's sentences, but are as different fundamentally as it gets. Good luck. Story 43. We had our twin girls in 2021, and they told us in the hospital that they put a clamp on the umbilical cord right after birth. The firstborn twin always gets 1 clamp, and the second receives 2 clamps. After that, they had wristbands with their names on it, and to be absolutely sure, bands around 1 foot as well. But I remember feeling like a bad mother because, for the first 3 to 4 weeks, I couldn't tell them apart. Now, I don't even need to see their faces to know which one is which. Story 44. There was someone on a different thread somewhere who had identical twins. One had a heart condition and needed medication to survive. That medication could hurt or kill a healthy baby or child. They got a medical tattoo on the sick kid. It looked like a freckle on the kid's earlobe, if I remember correctly. Story 45. Father of identical twins here. Green nail polish on the right foot of boy A and blue nail polish on the left foot of boy B. We think we have the names right, but they're identical, so no big deal. They're 17 now and usually remember their names from day to day.